Okay, Ubisoft have finally published the Year 8 Season 1 designer notes, and whilst the notes themselves don't contain anything too brand new and they're not as in-depth as perhaps some of the ones in the past have been, they have finally made a really nice change to the notes themselves in separating the stats for PC and console. In hindsight, this probably should have been from the start, but it's nice to have this addition and we can finally see which platform perhaps is a little bit smarter. We can now finally compare perhaps the metas on the two differing platforms, and I think this may open the opportunity for more platform-specific balancing changes going forward. So here are the designer notes. I'll link them down below if you're interested in checking them out in your own time. Essentially what these notes are an explanation from the devs as to what the current state of the game is and why they're making some of the balancing changes that they are heading into the next season. Now, every single patch note or designer note has these stats where it shows the win delta and presence of operators on high ranked games, but this time it's now been split along the lines of PC and console. Now, looking at attacks, some of the big differences that stand out to me, especially in the presence department, are operators like Nook, who on PC has really dropped off, now down at around 10%, where it's almost double that on console. And another operator that really stands out is actually Jackal. Now, Jackal's a very frustrating operator, and the ban stats have reflected that for a while, and we'll get into that in a little bit. On PC, has a presence of just over 20%, but a pretty poor win delta, almost one of the worst on attack, especially at this kind of pick rate. Whereas you look at console, where, again, the pick rate, not quite double, but close to it, and much closer to an even win delta. So it's little differences like that that show that PC and console are almost completely different games when it comes to Siege. Now on defense, and it almost gets even wilder. You have operators like the classics like Clash who remain pretty underpicked and weak across both platforms, but you have some big differences. The biggest one, and probably the most obvious, is Capcan. I mean, look at on PC, the presence hovering just under 30%, 2% win delta, so it is quite a strong operator at the moment. However, on console, it's in a whole other league of its own, double the presence, almost a 4% win delta, and I can't recall the last time I saw an operator getting close to 4%. It's probably been a long time, if maybe ever. So that's an insane stat. You also have Oryx, who is the most picked defender on console, and on PC, it's still somehow Jaeger, and everyone clumped close together. So again, wild differences. You have Thunderbird as well, hovering at about a 15% presence on PC. Console, the second most picked / banned operator. So many big differences. Mozzie as well, so popular. So the meta on defense for console is really in stark contrast to PC, where it feels like everyone's sort of clumped together. There's a lot of variance, and a lot of it would be site dependent, where it feels like there's probably a lot more global picks on the side of console. Another one to note as well is Frost has a significantly better win delta on console. Perhaps this is why Frost is getting reworked more so for console, because aiming down at traps is much more cumbersome on controller than keyboard and mouse, but that's purely just a theory and not something that Ubisoft has explicitly mentioned. Ban rates have also been split across PC and console. For the most part, they're fairly similar. Probably the biggest difference to note is that Blitz jumps up to about 6% on console. Now, shields historically have been very difficult to deal with on controller. You don't have near as much precision as you do on PC. That goes two ways, because it's more difficult for the shield, in theory, to get kills with controller. But in an era where a lot of people in Emerald and above are probably using Zims and whatnot, it's completely understandable that people ban shields off the board so they don't have to deal with that. On the side of defense then, and again, Capcan has such a crazy prevalence on console. Now, speaking from personal experience on the side of PC, Capcan for my stack did increasingly get banned more and more. In this meta, Capcan is very powerful, and we haven't really felt the need to ban any other super oppressive operators, but you can see on console, Capcan and Kai leading the charge. Interestingly enough, Valkyrie is also only down at about 3%. So that's also just a huge stark difference to PC again. It's like a 30% deduction in the amount of Valkyrie bands on console, which I don't quite understand. I guess perhaps the meta on console is completely devoid of information, and it's yeah, very, very different to how it's being played out on PC. As for the rest of the notes, then nothing too revolutionary that hasn't already been announced has been put into these notes. Quick reminder that the compensator has had its effectiveness increased, horizontal recoil reduction of 35% from 15%. So that's actually a pretty significant increase in efficiency. So the compensator might get a little bit more play now and a little bit more consistency across some weapons. Muzzle brake has had its first shot kick reduction of 50% from 45%. So DMRs now are going to be even more powerful. Keep that in mind because DMRs are already very, very strong. The only other change that's basically new is Twitch's shock drone. Its deceleration power has been increased to 14 from 5.9. You will stop sooner when releasing the input. This seems like overall a nice quality of life change because it makes the drone more responsive. And hopefully this makes Twitch a little less cumbersome to use. I personally don't play Twitch a whole lot, so I can't comment on whether or not the drone does feel quite poor at the moment. However, this does overall sound like a pretty positive change. So then, to summarize, Rainbow Six, as we probably expected, is almost two completely different games. Console and PC have a entirely different meta on attack, on defense, on ban rates. It's actually quite significant how big those discrepancies were. I wasn't expecting them to be that large. And to be honest, I think console is actually on the right track in some areas, like that Capcom ban, but then perhaps the lack of Valkyrie bans is a little bit concerning. And on attack, as we could see, it was basically neck and neck. So yeah, a lot to unpack. That was very, very interesting, and I'm keen to hear your thoughts. The other big discussion point is going forward, are we going to now see more platform-specific balancing changes across patches? Now, Ubisoft has kept it pretty restricted in the past. The only big significant discrepancies have really been in things like recoil management, for example, where console gets it a bit easier for obvious reasons, and maybe the odd thing here and there. But the fact that they're now splitting the stats in the designer notes, at least to me, speaks volumes that going forward, we could see bigger changes in how operators are balanced. Now, upon reflection, maybe the Frost rework is to mediate things on console, and that's going to reflect on both platforms, but maybe going forward, we will see it split in some ways. Now, that makes the game more difficult to manage. You've already got different builds of the game, but splitting it with balancing could make things more complex. I don't really know, but certainly something to keep an eye on. And heading through year 8, maybe heading into year 9, we'll see those differences come through.